What is going on, IF Warriors? It's your boy Edward V, and today we're going to talk about Connor Murphy, who's doing a 40-day fast. That's a pretty long time for anyone to fast. Now, I looked into how he's doing it, what he's doing, and I'm going to provide you guys with substantive information in regards to what he's doing based off of the science that we currently have, and essentially give you my thoughts about Connor Murphy doing his 40-day fast. Let's go ahead and break it down in this video. Stay tuned. Alright guys, quickly before we start, this video is brought to you by yours truly, Fledge Fitness and the Fledge Fitness Jump Rope. If you haven't gotten yours yet, what are you waiting for? With an aluminum handle, a swivel design, you can't go wrong with the Fledge Fitness Jump Rope. Due to the pandemic event that we're in, there is a very high demand for the jump ropes, but we are expecting our units to arrive soon so that we can go ahead and ship them out. So if you want to pre-order your jump rope, the link will be down in the description below, or you can click on the top right hand corner of this video. Now let's go ahead and jump right into the video. Okay, so first of all, I'm not gonna give you any type of bro science remark to what Connor Murphy is doing. I'm not going to tell you that he's going to die in 7 days. That I can't back up by any type of science whatsoever. By the way, any YouTube gurus out there who said that, it's not a dry fast, it's a water fast. With a dry fast, that might happen, but not with a water fast. So let's just move all that bro science stuff out of the way. Now, we're going to talk about why Connor Murphy wanted to do this 40-day fast, because that's important. You have to understand why someone is doing something. Now, from what I gathered from his video in which he's stating that he will do a 40-day fast, it appears that it's more of a spiritual journey than any type of health and fitness journey. It appears that he's doing it for religious purposes. And from what I got from the video in which he's announcing this, it appears that he's doing it based off of Christianity. So a Christian kind of religious fast, replicating the fast of Jesus Christ, that kind of scenario, almost like a spiritual cleansing that he's trying to do here. So you have to take what he's doing with that understanding. He is putting himself at somewhat of a risk, yes, but it might not be what you think, so stick with me. I'm going to explain the risks that he's doing. But what makes me believe that this is more than just a fast to fast from food is that he's also fasting from relationships, from women, from people, from everything. He's just secluding himself in his house and he is fasting. Now, the fascinating part of it is that you can somewhat look at this as a case study because he's also filming himself for the entire process. So he's doing a live feed. You can go there now and check to see. It's his 10th day. He's still alive. He didn't die. He's 2 days past 7. And if you look at him, and it's very tedious to watch, it's not entertaining at all. He's doing nothing but meditating and walking to his bathroom and walking back to his couch and flipping camera angles back and forth and maybe responding every once in a while to some comments, but he's doing essentially nothing. But it's archiving, which is important because then you can look back and say, oh wow, he actually did this. He actually fasted for 40 days, which makes it essentially a case study that we can look at. Obviously not under medical supervision or control, but something that us as the viewers can watch. Now, he does make a disclaimer and recommends no one do this if they're unhealthy, if not under medical supervision, which is kind of weird because he's not doing it under medical supervision unless you consult a doctor, which I'm not sure if he did or not, but he is putting those disclaimers out there because he doesn't want you to just jump into something that could potentially be a risk for you. Also, there's somewhat of a political angle to it as well, with how he wants to do a peaceful protest as opposed to an aggressive protest, and he thinks that this peaceful protest is going to be more impactful than an aggressive protest that involves violence. I don't think it's going to be as impactful as he thinks it is, but he can go ahead and try it and do what he needs to do for his own self development or what have you. Before I jump into the dangers of doing a 40-day fast, I'm going to jump into the misconceptions that people think comes with the 40-day fast. Now, there has been studies done looking at prolonged fasting. Now, there aren't many of them, but there have been studies done looking at this. The number one thing that everyone is going to say, or that everyone probably wants to say, is that, man, all his muscles is gonna go down the drain. He's gonna lose all his muscles because he's not eating, and then the body's just gonna collapse. His muscles are gonna be gone. Let me go ahead and explain this. Muscle in and of itself does not automatically ramp up because you are fasting. As a matter of fact, it ramps down because there's muscle sparing effects that take place, like HGH increase, insulin being incredibly low. All of these things start to spare muscle. What ends up happening is that the post-absorptive range kicks in and never stops until you start eating again. Fat oxidation increases exponentially, in which your body uses beta oxidation, which is ketone bodies that have to be fueled through fat. So the substrate for carbohydrate as energy completely drops off because you're depleting all of the carbohydrates. Muscle drops down as well, not as low as carbohydrates because remember, you just don't have it anymore in the system, so it's very, very low. And fat oxidation increases exponentially and continues this hold for as long as you are fasting. So what happens? Your brain can use ketone bodies instead of glucose for up to 70% of its energy. And that's what it does. It says, okay, time to use the fat stores that we've stored for this specific situation, starvation or fasting, and we're going to turn the fatty acids into ketones and fuel the brain with ketones as opposed to glucose. However, that extra 30% does require glucose. The brain still requires some glucose, which is why there is some glucose neogenesis, in which is breaking down amino acids to provide glucose. But you are significantly burning more fat, a lot more, than you are burning muscle. A lot more. The only issue with a 40-day fast is that there is never a replenish moment for your muscles. Yes, you are burning body fat aggressively, but you are not replenishing the muscle tissue. Now, there are elements that come with doing a prolonged fast. Autophagy specifically is just ongoing. It's non-stop because you're not eating. But in the book by the NIH called Comparative Physiology of Fasting, Starvation, and Food Limitation, Kevin D. Hall, with a PhD in physics and the senior investigator at the National Institute of Diabetes, Digestive, and Kidney Disease, breaks this down in a chart. You can see in the chart that there is an initial increase in carbohydrate use until that post-absorptive range kicks in. Then it drops substantially. Fat oxidation increases substantially, as it is what powers the beta hydroxybutyrate to create ketone bodies to begin with. And you can see a muscle sparing effect as well, as muscle usage drops considerably and stays very steady state for the entire time. The bottom is the fasting days. You can see this on the chart. There's a muscle sparing element that takes place, so he will not completely rip through the entire muscle that he's built. And even when he loses that muscle and starts to eat again, he can in effect regain that muscle due to the epigenetic biology of muscle memory. There are satellite cells that literally remembers how the muscle tissue was formed and can regrow those muscles in a very short period of time. He doesn't have to go through the years of weightlifting and protein intake to get back to where he was after he loses that small amount of muscle that he will be losing throughout those 40 days, which is one of the reasons why I don't recommend fasting for so long, because it is unnecessary. But one element that can be very dangerous for him is that his body fat percentage does not appear to be that high. So he will be incredibly lean after this trial. After 40 days, if he's okay, he will be incredibly lean because he will have used so much body fat while his body is also attempting to spare muscle at the same time. So mark my words, at the end of this, he will look very, very lean with some musculature still on him. Now, the dangers do not come from the fast itself. The dangers from doing a 40-day fast come really from the refeeding portion when he starts eating again. Now, there's something called refeeding syndrome, which is an aggressive fluctuations of fluids and electrolytes. Now, there aren't much information on refeeding syndromes or randomized control trials, because you don't really want to risk people's lives just to do a study. However, the National Institute of Health and Clinical Excellence in England and Wales did create a guideline to avoid refeeding syndrome back in 2006, which is what they use now, which many doctors who do prolonged fasting, in which they're supervising the patients, use now. Before it was understood that you should take electrolytes, they do say that you don't need to take electrolytes during the fasting period, but you do need to take it immediately after. You also need to ensure that you're taking vitamins immediately after the fasting period. Immediately. You need to replenish things like calcium, magnesium, potassium, all these electrolytes and all the vitamins that you weren't able to take in. You may have been able to take in some vitamin D from the sun, but you do need to consume some vitamin D, vitamin C. You have to try to replenish your body. And also, very important is that you have to start to eat incredibly slowly, because if you start to eat very aggressively, you can activate the refeeding syndrome that can be absolutely fatal, because there will be a massive hormonal and metabolic imbalance in which your body was at a steady state for 40 days. Now there's this influx of electrolytes, insulin is shooting up, all of these things are happening. There's this metabolic shift, this drastic shift that your body was not used to for 40 days. Your basal metabolic rate during this fasting period will also go down by 20 to 25% as your body tries to conserve as much energy as possible. So he will have to deal with that basal metabolic rate drop that he will have to slowly bring back to normal numbers. Based off of those guidelines, he will also have to be taking in 50% of his energy requirement and needs for the day per day. So if he was supposed to be taking 2,000 calories based off of his height and weight, he should be taking now 1,000 calories. And even when he does this, he needs to ensure that his blood levels aren't high, because if they are, then he can't just consume these things. He has to be monitored by a doctor. A doctor needs to prescribe a specific diet for him so that he can do it in the safest way possible. So these are where the complications come from. The complications come from a prolonged fasting refeeding. The refeeding part can create a refeeding syndrome that is very, very dangerous. And particularly in Connor Murphy's case, because he appears to be relatively lean, not incredibly lean, but relatively lean, that means that he may not carry enough body fat to sustain him well throughout the course of these 40 days. He possibly might have, but it's hard to tell. And that can be a level of concern, because if he reduces his body fat percentage too low, then he's at risk for organ shrinkage. And that in and of itself can be a fatal issue. So my thoughts on what he is doing is, it's hard to tell someone not to do something if they're doing it based off of something that is not science related, that is not because of a specific goal that is science oriented. He even stated in his video that he's doing things beyond the scope of science, which I never recommend. You should do things within the scope of science, because you are walking into something which I call an abyss. You don't know what's going to happen on the other side if you walk away from science. Yes, it might be freeing and you might have a feeling of freedom, but there is also a high degree of danger. And that's why you should be able to reference anything that you do with science, with scientific research, so that you know that you're in the correct path and the safest possible path. So I don't agree with him saying that he is pushing past what science allows. But on that same note and on that respect, he is doing it for a very different reason than health and fitness. It's a spiritual thing that he's trying to complete. And like I said, that is incredibly subjective to what he feels that he needs to do for his improvement or self-development. But please carry everything with caution. As I said, he is live streaming the entire time, so you could actually go and watch him as he's recording everything in real time and live streaming it on his channel. I do not recommend prolonged fasting. You can get multi-miniature versions of increasing body fat while depleting glucose when doing intermittent fasting without any of the risks of refeeding syndrome.